calling in to our Southwest Indiana Virtual GIS User Group meeting. Very excited today. We got 4 presenters, Aaron Myra, Matt Robinette, Kit Parks, and Philip Bernard. What we'll do is whenever we start this, we'll auto mute everybody so that way we don't get any background noise for the presenters to worry about. We'll also record this as well. So yeah, with that being said, I guess I'll leave it up to Erin to start it whenever she's ready. So Phil, if you can start recording, that would be awesome.
All right, good morning, everyone. Hey, Greg, I got to get you to stop sharing your screen. I'm not allowed to take over.
Oh, are you not? Oh, okay, here we go. Let's try it. Let's see how this works. All right, so let's see if you can get it now.
All right, everybody see me?
Sweet. Yep.
All right. So, okay, so for those of you who don't know, my name is Aaron Mara. I am the GIS specialist at CountryMark, and I've been there for a little over a year, and when I got there, there was no GIS. It was kind of a surprise. I did, but so I went back. I felt were the important points of starting from scratch, and I think that some of this is going to be applicable if you're doing a big upgrade as well. But yeah, it's been almost exactly a year since we got started, so it's been an adventure. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. So before you decide what you want, why is this not working? There we go. So evaluate where you are. What are you using now? Do you have anything to manage your spatial data? Do you have any spatial data? Do you really need to change what you're doing? So whatever you've got now, how does it address your needs? I mean, is it something that you can work with your existing system to improve and or expand and get to where you need it to be, or do you really need to change over to something new? And also examine what kind of technical expertise do you already have, and what do you need to hire or contract to bring on board? So some of this is going to be very specific to CountryMark, some of it's going to be more general. I'm going to start with the more general stuff. So when CountryMark started, when I came on board, they were using Autodesk. So to the left here, you see the actual desktop interface. To the right, you see what we had. And when I'm looking at our image on the right here, it's not intuitive to me. And there are many people who are not GIS users who would argue that GIS isn't intuitive either. And that's fine. It does take a certain amount of training. But this, like, can you tell that the yellow is a foreign line and the pink is our line? It was just a struggle. And the other thing about the layout of AutoCAD that they had when I started was that, and I'll be honest, I don't know anything about AutoCAD, I've never used it, and I don't know if it's possible to do this, but with the system that they had, AutoCAD wasn't talking to itself. You know, you couldn't make the layers, the 6-inch pipe interact with the property lines. So it was a very clunky, disjointed system. So here's your basic steps. If you decide you need a GIS, and whether it's a major upgrade or a new system entirely, identify the people within your organization currently that may have need for it, and get input on what they need. And think outside the box. It's not always going to be one team, it might be many, and it might be teams that you don't think of. Like for us, corrosion. Well, the more digging the more I could see that maybe we could help them with the GIS. And what that does when you bring together people at your organization, you say, what do you need? What can we do? How can this serve you? Is you build your buy-in. And something I'm going to come back to a couple of times, it's really important because every time you have a little hiccup, somebody else is going to say, no, we need to be persistent with this. We're going to fix this hiccup. This is something that we all need, want, are willing to invest in. So from there, identify your staffing and contracting needs. So I say staffing and contracting because some of your needs are going to be short-term. That's when you want contractors, but some of them are going to be long-term and you're probably going to need to hire somebody. Then your team at work within your organization on board. Find somebody that's going to play nice. And we all joke about IT, but there are some really great IT folks out there. Find the one that's going to be your champion. And we were really lucky to do that right at the beginning. And he has bent over backwards. He's a wonderful guy. I can reach him anytime to get solutions, and we can work together to fix things. Bring in the people who are not going to be your GIS primary operators, but who are going to use your system. Get them all together in a room. And I do mean physically, because that's the best way to get consensus. And from there, you're going to identify some primary goals. And you really need to have both near-term and long-term goals. Near-term to keep your initial build project on track. Very important. And that also helps you narrow down. Having those near-term goals helps you narrow down where to start, what information to bring in, who to work with most closely at the beginning, things like that. Having long-term goals keeps you moving forward later on. So when you narrow down those near-term goals and you say, okay, it helps you really want to grab just a small subset of your data. You don't want to be trying to add all of your data at the same time. You would get bogged down in the data. There was some article from Princeton or Yale not long ago, and basically the data is never what you need it to be. So anytime you pick data to load into the system, you will have some refining to do, and narrowing down how much data you add at the beginning really makes that a manageable task. So now that you've got all of that, especially your near-term and your long-term goals, again, are going to help you identify your structure. And this is, again, where you need your IT people. So you need to have a structure that is going to allow you room to grow, give you the space to add the users, and give them the access that they need. And there are definite positives and negatives to desktop deployments, ArcGIS Online deployments, and enterprise deployments in a couple of different environments. And you're going to lean on your experts here, lean on your IT people, and ask your users what's going to be the best for you as you figure all of that out. And then plan and price your project, getting it approved. Remember I was talking about buy-in earlier? If there is a room full of people telling your management that, yes, this is something I want and will use, you are far more likely to get that money in your hands. And this is all stuff that I had nothing to do with at CountryMark. This happened before I joined the company, but the results of their investment in their coworkers and their building their buy-in is something I see every single day. You know, I have people saying, hey, I'm really interested in getting this online. Can we do it? And when they say that, that means that I have a lot more flexibility to upgrade my products, to buy extensions, to buy new hardware, because people are going to use it and the company as a whole sees value in it. So, and when you're pricing that, talk to technical experts. Bring them on board early. And I always talk about Esri because that's the one I've worked most closely with over the years. But there are other software companies, and every single one of them, if you call and say, this is what I have in mind, what do you think? There's not a single one of them that's going to charge you for that time. When you start using their assistance to build things out, yeah, but they have entire teams of people that are just dedicated to getting you on board, making sure you have everything you need to get started, and making sure you have the right things for your goals. Lean on them, use that expertise. And don't pad your budget a whole lot, but a little bit of padding is good, because sometimes you run into things mid-project that you're like, oh, holy crap, I got to spend another $5,000 to get this to work optimally. And if you don't have that room in your budget, that could be a struggle later on. So now that you've got your in place, get started. Compile your data and start your cleanup. So this can be done by any number of people. You can enlist people who are not going to be GIS operators to help, because they probably know their data best. What's valid, what's out of date. Get them to help you. Go ahead and do your purchasing, get your contractors online, and set up a timeline. Have deadlines. Because people, especially when you're organizing a team, it's not going to be as efficient or as high a priority as if there is a deadline associated with it. And give yourself more time than you think you're going to need. Esri will tell you that you can build an enterprise deployment in 2 days, but I haven't talked to anybody that that's happened for. For us, we gave ourselves 2 weeks and we took every minute of it. You are always going to run into hiccups, workarounds. Oh, I didn't know that security problem popped up, that kind of thing. So you're going to need extra time. And once the initial build is done, get a final schematic. Get a single document that shows your server layout, your IP addresses, your usernames and passwords, everything that was done during the build, because that is going to be really important. Moving forward, you're going to refer to it a bunch. I still use it probably every week or two. Just, hey, what's the IP address for that unit? And got to get in there and do some whatever. Or if I have a tech support issue, I can send it out to my tech support and be like, hey, this connection right here isn't working. That has been an important thing for us. And going back to the buy-in, maintain contact with your entire team the whole time this is happening. You know, give them daily updates if things are happening daily. We did mostly weekly updates. So I could say, hey, we're building this environment, we're loading this data, so that they know you're making progress and you're still thinking of them. And in turn, they will still think of you. So that communication is going to keep people invested in your project, and it needs to be a constant thing. So once you've got it built, you're really only just starting. So this part is gonna be more applicable to ArcGIS Online and Enterprise rather than a desktop deployment, because that's what almost everybody is going to. So once you start building your portal, work with your company, continue to work with your company. So when I started building this, I developed workflows to keep everything looking similar. I worked with our marketing department. I only used country mark images. So that image in the background, that is actually our refinery. That's it. Like, that's what I see when I go to work in the morning. These people in the banner, these are our employees. And that helps, it helps keep your marketing department or PR department, whatever you have, in touch with what's going on. It keeps a unified company brand, and it makes everybody happy. We like it when they're happy. I have a great relationship with our head of marketing. She's a lovely lady. And anytime I have questions, I can go to her. And it's good to have that line of communication. So as you're loading your building blocks, the data that you loaded when you started your GIS, those are going to be your building blocks, your foundational layers. You can see the thumbnails I have designed are unified. So just have a workflow, get in it, make it all look the same, make it all look pretty, because that makes people feel like you're not, I don't know how to say this without being rude, a hack job. They like to see a unified look. They feel like it's more professional, even if they get in and get past this page and there's a couple of things that aren't perfect, they can say, oh, I can clearly tell that that's just in progress. It'll be fine by tomorrow. And then start making your maps. But remember, as you make your maps, that maps don't exist in a vacuum. They exist to serve people. So again, go back to your team, your guidance team, and the people who are going to be using this, and make sure you know what they need, what they want. What's going to be easiest for them to use. Don't put too much, but don't put too little on your map. Work with them as you're developing your symbology so that they understand what they're looking at and something is easy for use, because it has to serve them in the end. And then once you're started, keep building. Keep adding data. You never know where you're going to find it. Different groups that had nothing to do with your startup may have data hidden that you find useful. You may find hard copy data, and that's, I can tell you from personal experience, not the easiest to deal with, but it can be dealt with. You can bring hard copy data into your database and take data that maybe wasn't useful before and make it useful. You can skip some steps for people that are constantly digging through filing cabinets to pull stuff out. And believe me, they appreciate that. And dig through projects that are finished. If you had projects from contractors from 3 years ago, you may find that there's data digitally and in hard copy sitting around that nobody's using but could be used. It's there. And once you get there, start expanding your user group within your organization. So, and this ties back into the data mining as well. Take a deeper dive into the capabilities of the things you already own. Web research, webinars, conferences are really great to kind of dig in. And it can expand your capabilities within your organization, maybe without spending a dime. People love that. And again, you can kind of combine your data mining with expanding your user group by talking to other groups. What do they do? What's your daily task? What is the thing you do over and over again the most? So talk to supervisors, but also talk to your guys who are your boots on the ground. Supervisors are a great source of data. The guys on the ground are the ones who are telling you, yeah, this form isn't great, or I have to come into the office more than I want to submit these hard copy forms. And they're going to be the ones that can also test new things for you, and you need them to be honest with you. So building a good relationship with them is a great plan. You know, because we love technology, but not every new workflow is actually an improvement. And you need them to tell you that. There's no reason that you should be deploying things if they don't streamline and make everything smoother. Also, learning about any regulatory requirements is important, because you may be able to simplify some of their regulatory workflows in the long run. This isn't all going to happen overnight, of course, but this goes back to having some long-term plans as well to keep you on a forward path. So with some more specifics with what it looked like for Country Mark as we worked through this, for us, our original guidance team included maintenance, right-of-way, and integrity personnel. And at the time that they were starting this, trying to decide whether they wanted a GIS, what was the best plan, they were still in that AutoCAD system. And the person who had set it up didn't work here anymore. It was becoming an older, more bulky system because they kept adding data to it. It was starting to get glitchy, and it was taking more and more of the time of the people who were running it, which was the right-of-way department. Well, the right-of-way department has a very important job, and in our group, in our company, One Call, our safety department or dig department, falls under the category of right-of-way. So they were spending way too much time managing this glitchy old software and working with software that just didn't integrate very well, and it was getting to be too much. On top of that, I think I mentioned before, it was going to stop being supported. So they had to find another option. So several of the team members went to the Esri Petroleum Conference, which was a great idea, and learned a little bit about what an Esri GIS could do for them. And with that information, they decided they wanted to go ahead, and they hired the TIMS group out of Houston to kind of scope everything, design, and then eventually execute the project. And that's where they decided that they really needed a full-time person to manage this, and hired yours truly. So this is when I come on board. This is when my the hearsay stops and the first person experience begins. So as they developed more of the plan, the management team shifted, and it became right-of-way and integrity. Maintenance dropped out because their project was going to be more of a long-term thing. Our IT group, of course, thankfully, like I said, we had that really great IT point of contact. He's a fantastic resource, and I'm so glad we have him. And then me and our contractors, Tim's being the point, of course. So the original near-term goal was to give the right-of-way team a daily mapping function that was more responsive, less glitchy, easier, and could integrate more of their data. So with AutoCAD, they couldn't, it's not a database program. They couldn't keep all their data in one place. So they were using AutoCAD and then going back to other spreadsheets and databases to get ownership information, parcel ownership or parcel payment information, things like that. Township and locality type stuff was all held in different locations. So the goal was to streamline their daily workflow. And that was it. That was our near-term goal. And fortunately, we were able to pull a great deal of the data from AutoCAD, and most of you are aware that AutoCAD translates really well. There's not a whole lot of crazy transformations to be done when you bring your data over. But a lot of the data from AutoCAD needed cleanup. So because that particular system had been in use for, I think it was over 10 years, maybe 15, and so many users had had access to the system over that time, there were things like accidentally saved distance markers, or so things got saved as assets or features that didn't actually exist. So that was all part of cleanup that had to happen. And that got rolled into the task, and we put a bunch of contractors on that too, because there was so much to be done. It just was too much for one person. And from there, that happened in conjunction with the actual build out. And I mentioned we took every minute of those 2 weeks. And what we ended up choosing was an enterprise deployment in an Azure environment. And I use virtual desktop interfaces to manage them. And the reason it took every minute of those two weeks was we have rigid information security protocols, and we had to find workarounds for a couple of things and build tunnels and things that are not necessarily going to be an issue if you deploy in an on-site server. But the enterprise deployment instead of ArcGIS Online allowed us to keep those information security protocols and maintain the level of security that we need. And the virtual desktop is great because here I am sitting in my house doing what I need to do to manage my job. And I can do that whether I'm at a conference or homesick or anything like that. I can handle everything, which is a fantastic benefit. So when it comes to building our portal, I did not find that intuitive at all. So I would suggest getting help. Portal organization, Esri was a huge, I really appreciated it. But I may go back for more help later too, because the more data you add, the more you find that organizational issues become prevalent. The one great thing about this layout, though, is I have a high degree of control over user management, who can see what, who can change what is connected to which version of the database on the backside. I love it because we don't run into those issues that they did with AutoCAD, where people are accidentally saving things as features. If I haven't trained them, they don't have the ability to save things as features, which is fantastic. You know, you're not spending time each week cleaning up your database. If it's clean, then it stays clean. So, and then going back to that training is once I've trained them, they can also take all the data that I've loaded to the portal and make their own maps, which is wonderful. That allows me to get away from some of the lighter weight tasks for like, oh, I want to see these two things together. Okay, they can do that themselves, and I can dedicate more time to, you know, refining data or designing new workflows, things that people other than me can't really do. And I will say that once you get the data loaded, making maps is actually really easy, but for students, like I get phone calls, I've taught them how to do some basic editing workflows, and I get phone calls and they're like, I can do this, right? I'm like, yep, literally all I'm doing is giving them permission to use the knowledge they have. They need that, that's fine, I can do that. It still takes a little bit off of my plate. And data mining is an ongoing thing for us. I just added layers from AutoCAD 2 weeks ago, last time I was in the office. Now, we don't give them the same level of review that we did to the layers that we added as our building blocks, but remember I taught people how to do some basic editing. So when they find things that don't belong, they just delete them. No big deal. So it's I like to call it crowdsourcing your data review. Teaching people to have agency within their own data. It's great. And we've been pulling data from all over the company. So when I first got my stations data set from, I think we pulled that from AutoCAD, it was a mess, a total mess. And somebody said, and I don't even remember who anymore, hey, so-and-so over at the trucking group might have a better data set. And I was like, huh. So sure enough, I hoofed my butt over to their office and sat down and said, hey, do you have this? And he goes, oh yeah, we just installed a new tracking system. Look at all this beautiful data. It gives me a fantastic spreadsheet, and I'm able to load it with very little cleanup. It was wonderful. So ask around. Our valve data has come from the corrosion group. Tank data has come, like I was cross-referencing existing tank data with our spill prevention plans, so to make sure I knew that they were all up to date. I also pulled some tank data from another group in our company, the Energy Resources Group, which is actually a completely different division than the refinery. And pipeline data, they have a lot of really great information in the control room that I can, cross-reference and add metadata and great stuff. So, and even if you find, like, we have filing cabinets full of right-of-way legal information, contracts and things like that. Well, we want that to be accessible, but it's all hard copy. The company's been in existence for 100 years now. So some of these hard copy contracts are 50, 60 years old. Well, even if we can't use it the way it is right this instant, it gives us direction for the future. We can say, okay, how useful would this be? How many man hours can we save if they're not digging through file cabinets? And make that a priority for next year's project, to hire scanners and interns or whatever it is, to start making this data more useful and more accessible. This is my favorite part, expanding our capabilities. So when I went several conferences before we even got this built, I learned that nobody had planned to use the Esri field apps. And then I started going to all these talks on the field apps, and I did some hands-on training sessions, and these are free. So I was like, wait a second, why can't we use these to improve things? So we have. We actually, the one call ticket is not part of our original build plan, but we prioritized it and actually started using Workforce in conjunction with Survey 123 and Collector for a new one call workflow, and got that online last fall. It's fantastic. So now all of our information is digital. There's no hard copies. Our field staff don't have to come back into the office to file paper copies, which they were for however many years this has been going on. So as of last fall, we went 100% digital using apps that we didn't have to pay a dime for. And everybody's doing really well with it. Even fortunately, these apps are surprisingly user-friendly. I had a one-day training session, and even some of our locators who have been doing the job for a real long time, and they swear up and down they don't know what to do with technology. They are doing just fine. They are, they definitely have a great attitude about it. They're like, I don't know if I can get this, but I'm gonna try. And every single time they've been able to pick it up and be using it in the field within 24 hours. So this has been a great benefit to us. And as we've developed this workflow for one call, we've found other places in the company that we can use it as well. So when I talked to some of our maintenance crews, they were doing repairs and tie-ins, and they were tagging it with these old handheld data loggers. And I was like, wait a second. And I pulled up the software. You have to have a third-party software to download the data. You have to post-process it. And I said, okay, who can teach me how to that guy retired 10 years ago. I was like, or no, not 10 years ago. He had retired 3 or 4 years ago. And I was like, oh, so who's well, nobody. I was like, so you've got 3 or 4 years of data stored on these data logs. Okay, let's find a better option. So I talked to the people who, the company that we had purchased the data loggers from in the first place, and to upgrade the software, get a new version of the downloading and post-processing software, to get training for the field users and for me, was going to cost a small fortune. So what we did instead was we bought several small GNSS receivers that connect to the phones we already had deployed with the guys in the field via Bluetooth, feeds directly into our web maps, and it actually cost less to buy 13 of those GNSS receivers than it did to update the software for the old data loggers. So if you guys want, I've got like 4 giant paperweights. So if you any use for those, you just let me know. And overall, what that did is I found a couple of places where similar workflows were being done in different groups. And now instead of those groups trying to fight over the data loggers or the data going into two different places. So I'll pick on the foreign line crossings for this. Instead of having foreign line crossings collected by maintenance and foreign line crossings collected by right-of-way, and now everybody's trying to figure out where does the data, the hard copy data get stored, because this was all done on a piece of paper, and where does, who's going to keep it, who needs to enter it into the database. Now they use the same Survey 123 form. It goes into the same layer in the GIS, and there is no hard copy at all. It's fantastic. And fortunately, the form, all of these were basic PDF forms, which translate really well into Survey 123. And now, if maintenance is out collecting foreign line crossings, we can see it in real time. So if my right-of-way people, if there's a one-call dispatch in the same area where maintenance is working right now, we can see, you know, oh, they just added that. That's really important. We'll add that to the ticket. And then the one I just deployed 2 weeks ago, actually, is our valve inspections. So we have a one-to-many relationship with a valves layer and the valve inspections. And we can feed those together with Survey 123. And I have, again, same GNSS receivers are out. We just bought more of them because they're not that expensive. And send them out in the field, do a quick, I think it took me an hour to train those guys. They're all really smart and capable. So they came in, showed them what they were doing. And as of last week, they were out, or sorry, 2 weeks ago, they were out doing valve inspections in the field, and it's all feeding into my database. So this has been fantastic. And now, and I will make a point, the GNSS receivers that we bought are sub-meter accuracy, not sub-centimeter. For us, that's fine. For surveyors, they want the more expensive ones, and that would have been a prohibitive price jump for us. But they're so easy to use. They're lightweight and easy to carry the field. I don't see us ever going back. So all this to say, GIS that has a bunch of daily users, both in the office and in the field. We were able to create user-friendly deployments and streamline a bunch of workflows. And as far as I know, everyone tells me they're happy with it. So that's what I got. And again, those long-term goals and that hard copy data that we found has been great for giving us direction to keep moving forward as well. So with that, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, if you have questions, you can unmute to ask Aaron, or you can just send the question in chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? All right, well, thank you, Aaron. That was a great presentation. Thank you for showing us how you got everything started there, and yeah, where you guys are at now. It's really impressive what you've done.
Well, and if anyone has questions going forward, you're always welcome to email me about what we did or where you think it might be easiest to get started, depending on where you're at.
Very cool. Cool. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Well, let's see. Up next will be Matt Robinette from the city of Petersburg. Let's see. Matt, do we got you on the phone? Can you hear us?
I hope so. I should be, I think.
Yep, we can hear you. We can hear you. All right. Yep, go ahead and take control. Go ahead and start sharing. And yeah, I'll let you take it away, young man.
All right, sounds good. All right. I'm Matt Robinette. I'm with the City of Petersburg, and I am the GIS coordinator as well as an assistant wastewater operator. I have been GIS coordinator for just a little under 9 months now, so this is all relatively new to me. But in the last year, I've been working on a project on the wastewater side of things, addressing inflow and infiltration for the City of Petersburg. So this is my project. It's a qualitative study to determine areas most susceptible to inflow and infiltration. Here's a brief description of what inflow and infiltration is, or I&I, in case you're unfamiliar with it. It is pretty much rainwater and groundwater that enters into a sanitary sewer system. And there's many different means of that occurring. For instance, there's roof drain connections tied into the private lateral line, or illegal storm connections that drain straight into the sewer mains, all the way to roots intruding into a pipe or cracked pipes. This is a major problem for wastewater plants and systems because I&I adds a lot of water to the system, and most times it's more than the system is designed to handle, and this causes pumps from lift stations and at the plant to go into overdrive and to work harder, thus producing more wear and tear on the equipment. It also causes the treatment plant to clean already clean water that doesn't need to be treated. And so you're just putting more wear and tear on your entire system with this I&I problem. And with more water in the system also means possibilities for manhole overflows and basement backups. And as many other areas, we struggle with a major I&I problem. And I wanted to create a visual on this problem. And so I got to research, and I was researching, and I came across two similar studies like this for larger municipalities, and I wanted to recreate it for the City of Petersburg. And so that's what I did. And as I was producing it, I figured I could use this as a plan to address I&I issues in the future for data assessment purposes. Like most projects, there are two main ways of collecting data. There is a quantitative approach or a qualitative approach. And a quantitative approach is information and I guess results based off of statistical information or hard evidence found via running tests or conducting different methods of practices out into the field. So for a study like this, a quantitative approach would be dropping in and placing flow meters in several of the sewer mains and recording data over an extended period of time and gathering the flow numbers during a wet season and during a dry season and comparing the range of those flows, and also recording the rain amount and in those areas along with the flow meters. And then there's the qualitative approach, which is it's information gathered from non-statistical information. And it is essentially what I kind of think of it as is basic GIS data. It is data that you put in. If you're putting in a point, say someone's dug up a sewer main and you're standing over there and you're going to tag that point, it's the basic description you put in there. You're going to put in the size of the pipe. You're going to put in the material of the pipe. You're going to put in the depth of it. And it's going to have a date to it, so you're going to have an age. And so this is qualitative information, and it is, like I said, it's based on characteristics, and attributes and labels. So this project is a qualitative approach to addressing I&I issues. And the one good thing about the good thing about qualitative studies is one, it's cheaper and it's more time efficient. We're a small staff here, so we're undermanned and we don't have the time to go out and gather information on a daily basis at several places reading flow meters, or we don't have the funds to purchase these flow meters and to gather this information. So using a method like this, you can kind of take the guesswork out of where you could start digging in and addressing these problems. And I'll address this, I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail with that later with the results. So what I did was I took 4 parameters or 4 characteristics of the sewer mains that I thought were most influential to inflow and infiltration. And that was the age of the pipe, pipe material, pipe depth, and the soil type. These are all, we were looking, and those are all 4 main contributors to I&I. So these results were produced in Excel and QGIS, and I was able to mix them together and produce these images and the results for this study. So here is a map of the city of Petersburg, shown and colorized, categorized by the pipe age. And I broke up ages into 20-year decades, blue being the youngest to red being the oldest. And I broke it up by 20 years because most of our plans followed kind of a 20-year upgrade. We had part, the downtown area you can see here, it's the oldest, it was back in the 30s. And then about every 20 years, there was an upgrade or there was add-ons to the city. And so that scheme, the 20-year decade, really kind of worked out well, I believe, for this project. Pipe material, I broke that down into the 5 pipes we have throughout the city. Blue being the newest, that's your PVC pipe, and going from light blue to ductile iron pipe, reinforced concrete pipe, to cast iron, and your clay pipe. And as you can see, the downtown area is the oldest part of town, so it's consistent with having that clay pipe lined. Pipe depth. This was a parameter that was not in any of the other similar studies that I referenced, and it was something I was looking at the groundwater table one day, and I got to thinking the more shallow that groundwater table is, the more time these lines are susceptible and submerged in a sense underneath this water table, so they have a better chance to kind of take on water during the wet months. And then as it dries out, that water table gets deeper, so the shallower lines are better off in that sense. So I figured pipe depth was a good parameter to use for influence on I&I. And then there's soil type. There's 4 main types of soil. There's A, B, C, and D. A being your sandy type soils with the highest infiltration rates, and your D type soils being the lowest infiltration rate, and those are going to be your clay type soils. There were no D soils in the city limits, so I was able to use the combo soils B, D, and CD and break them up this way. And as you can see, majority of the downtown district is in a B type soil. And then the majority of everything west of these railroad tracks is in an A-type soil. So the whole city itself, majority of the city itself fall in a high infiltrating soil type. So how I got my results is I went through and I graded every sewer main. And I first did that, I overlaid my soil layer and broke that up into the soil types A, B, B, D, C, and CD, and I used that to split my sewer mains into segments. And so if I had one segment that went into two soil types, it now became two segments. One segment was in one soil type, the other segment in the other. And this way it would break it up kind of evenly. And so after that, I went through and I scored and I graded every segment, every sewer segment. And it got a score from a 2 being in excellent condition to a 10 being in poor condition. And I did that based off those 4 parameters. So for instance, a pipe that was under 20 years, 20 or under, it got a pipe age score of a 2. Or a pipe that was a clay pipe got a score of a 10, and so on and so forth. And so here's a snippet of my Excel sheet down here of 3 mains or 3 segments and how they were scored. So segment 1 here, it was 61 years. It was given an age score of 8, you know, and it was it's a reinforced concrete, so it was giving a score of 6, so on and so forth. So I did that with every segment in the project. Next, in order to use those scores, I had to create matrices, and these are what produced the results. There are 6 matrices, as you can see here. There's a weighted matrix, and then there's an age, material, depth, and soil matrix, and then there's an equal matrix. The weighted matrix is what I have used and will use for my base results. That's the one that I wanted, those are the results I was looking for, or I would refer back to for this study. The 4 parameter matrices, as you see here, are they are there to help answer questions from that weighted matrix. And I have an example of that towards the end here, how a person could use them to answer questions. And then my equal matrix is my control, to be sure I have everything balanced properly. And what these matrices are, it's these 4 parameters given a weightage or a percentage of a total score. And so my weighted matrix, I gave pipe age, it was 40% of a total score. And pipe material and pipe depth were 15%, and then soil type was 30%. And then with the parameter matrix, I gave that parameter the dominance of influence on I&I. And so here, age matrix has, I gave it 70% impact on influence on I&I, and I split the other 3 up into 10%. And then the equal matrix is giving everything an equal influence on I&I, thus giving it all 25%. So here is an example of this using pipe 1 right here. This is the weighted matrix. So pipe age, it was scored an 8 times 40% of an importance, it scored at a 3.2. And then you do that for the following parameters: 6 at 15%, 4 at 15%, and then soil type was 4 at 30%. And that segment got a total weighted matrix score of 5.9. I did that for all 6 parameters. So this one line, this one segment here would have 6 matrix scores, 1 for each of these matrix based on these percentages of influence. So here are the results for this project, and you're going to see a very consistent, something very consistent here, and it's going to be this downtown area. This is obviously the oldest part of town. It has the oldest pipe, and it's in a very high infiltrating soil type. So you're going to see a very consistent red in this downtown district. So what these colors mean is they're categorized. Light green is very low susceptibility to a dark green, which is low, brown being a moderate, pink being high, and red being a very high susceptibility to I&I based off this matrix. And the matrix is down here in the corner showing you the importance of each parameter used. So using this weighted matrix, pipe age was a 40%, soil was 30, and pipe depth and material were 15 apiece. This is the result I have. So using this result, I can say, you know, the downtown area has a big potential for an I&I problem and or concern. And then you can see the newer parts of town, your outside parts, are in the lower end, moderate to low end, because those are newer. They have better quality pipe put into them, and so the results are that way. And then I'm going to jump to my equal matrix, which I give everything the same importance. And as you can kind of see here, as I jump back and forth quickly, there's not much of a difference. There's a few lines. For instance, this line right here changes just a hair, but for the most part, this control is very similar to what I got right here. So it kind of makes me a little confident that I may have chosen somewhat accurate percentages on my weighted matrix. Now here is the age matrix, where age was giving the utmost importance on influence for I&I. And as you can see, the downtown area is the worst, highest susceptibility, with your outskirts being your lower susceptibility. Here's the material, same thing. A lot of that's all clay through there, and that is why that area is red. And then the depth matrix, it is pink. I didn't have too many in the poor range on my scale. My scale was 12 feet or deeper, was graded as a 10, and I didn't have, but maybe this line right here was 12 feet or deeper, and that's the main trunk line running to the plant. So everything else is kind of bumped back, but you could still see this pink, that is still the highest area in the downtown, in the city of Petersburg. And then the soil type, same thing here. Soil was given most importance to influence, and the downtown area in that B type is still high, and then the A type over here, west of the railroad tracks, flagged as a very high susceptibility as well. So catch up here. All right, so the purpose of these other matrices is this. I'm going to focus on, let me go back to my weight here, this area of town right here, this Pike Avenue, and I've kind of cut this little area out up here, and we're going to answer a question here about this. So this is my weighted matrix scale. This was showing a pink, which is a high susceptibility to I&I off the score values. So a person could come in and say, okay, why is this flagging me as a high susceptibility to I&I? So using these other parameter matrices, a person could begin to kind of narrow down possibilities. They can look at the age matrix, where age was given dominance to the influence to I&I, and it came out as a brown, which was average, a moderate level, so nothing really to flag there. Same with depth. Depth, it was a moderate range, you know, nothing to really be concerned there. But when you go look at the other two, you have the soil matrix. Okay, that flags. That turns into a red. That's a very high susceptibility to I&I. But a person can't go in and change the soil type. You really just can't go in and do that. So your person needs to make a note. Okay, I got a red flag here, possibly because of my soil type. Is there any other? And you continue on to your last parameter, the material matrix, and it was giving a high susceptibility to I&I using this material matrix. So then a person can say, okay, this is red because of my material. And then you go back, what material is it? It is a clay. It's a clay line right through there. Thus, that can produce some I&I problems for a person in the future. So then you could go back and say, okay, maybe if we get the funds or the time, we should go back and either put in a flow meter right here to gauge all this water during a wet time and during a dry time and acquire quantitative data. And then a municipality could go in and replace that line as needed. And so what this qualitative study does is it helps take guesswork out of it, because now we could go through and we have a map like this and we could say, okay, this shows a bad area. Well, if we have a flow meter, we can get down in there. Let's get down in there and just see what it does. See if during a rain event, if this line picks flow up drastically. If it does, okay, we got a problem. If it doesn't, okay, you make note of it and move on. So there are some limitations to this study, and that is being some of my data may be inaccurate. We're only given the information we have, and going back through, I went through and had to input, I went through all our blueprints and had to input a lot of this into our GIS software and into QGIS manually to start it all out. And so I may have overlooked a newer map for a certain part of town. And so therefore my data could be a little older than it shows than in reality. So that's kind of a limit on this. I was missing a few points, a few mains. I cut out all force mains, but there were a few other mains I couldn't find data on, whether it was depth, age, material, and in that case I just scrapped it entirely. But I was maybe missing 20 mains out of 450, so I'll take that any day. My parameter matrices, obviously you saw there different percentages can produce different results. So, you know, a person may come in and say, you know, I think this is of higher importance than what I had. And so the results are going to kind of move with, you know, these percentages. So you got to keep that in mind as well. And then there's more parameters a person can use. And a lot of this project, as if you could tell, was kind of heavily focused on infiltration. That is groundwater, you know, with the pipe depth or pipe age underground and pipe material underground, and it really doesn't address inflow. So there are more parameters a person can do to address that by adding in storm sewers. And, you know, if you have a main that is crossing underneath of a storm drain or a storm culvert, you can add that in to the matrix and throw that percentage in and give that in addition to the score. Because I know here in town we've had one side of the road water coming in as hard as can be into a culvert, and on the other side it's dry as can be, and you pop the manhole there downstream of that and there's all that water coming into it. So these storm sewers would help potentially address the inflow portion of this study. There's also manholes. Manholes are leaky, they're cracky, they don't seal properly at the lids. So that's another parameter of inflow a person could throw in to help further this study. And then same with laterals, private laterals. We don't have a database on that. And then once I was given the reins to run as GIS coordinator, we have started to make tabs and record all those laterals as we come across them. And so we are slowly building that database to hopefully get enough data to add these in, because private laterals are a huge source of the I&I problem. And, you know, as the municipality, normally we don't have control over those, so it's hard to you know, monitor them as necessary. And then also there's size and length of pipe to keep in mind. There's some coefficients, some flow coefficients you could throw in as a parameter as well to help further some of these matrices. And then there's impervious surfaces. We all know the downtown areas are built up and concrete, and water don't seem to infiltrate too well through that. So I plan on going back and kind of updating this with the more information I continue to gather. And I'm thinking of blocking off a certain portion of downtown area as impervious and giving that a D-type soil and seeing how that can change my results and maybe move the focus to other parts of town other than just that downtown area. And then the last part of this is another application for this study is waterline leak potential. You could do the very same thing with a qualitative study. You could gather the age of your water main, the material, the soil type, or the characteristics of the soil, because I know we got some of our soils eat at some of our older pipes. You go in and they're just corroded at the bottom, and where they've set and they've just been ate away over the years. And then repairs per so many length of pipe. I know we've had water leaks, and there've been 4 or 5 patches within 50 foot that don't help your cause at keeping a sound, secure, tight water system. And then there's water pressure. You got a bad pipe with a lot of repairs on it, you get a high pressure on it, it's liable to blow. So this creates a map of a data assessment on your potential lines that are in worse shape that you may be able to replace if you were to get the funding or you had the time to do so. So once again, using this qualitative study and approach, a person can then turn around and when funds are available or when you have the manpower, go back and produce a quantitative study or method of taking care of a problem by referring back to this and knowing maybe where to start or where your lines are bad, or gives you a great starting point of where to start further on down the road. So that brings any questions, and then I'm going to kind of go through here, and I got my stuff pulled up. Here's my QGIS map of my study I did. And so, for instance, let's zoom in right here. Let it load up here real quick. Turn some of these off. So here is my all right, so here's a sewer main. This is all one segment in the book. There's a manhole here, and it starts here. But you can see the different soil types. This was a BD type soil, and this was a CD type soil, and you can see they are split at that joint. So that's what I did through all these mains. Through here, you could see it here as well. They are split at every soil type. And then they are broken up into 2 segments. So for instance, this segment's 97, this one's 218. So for instance, I'll go into segment 97, pull up my Excel sheet where I did all my math and number crunching, scroll down to segment number 97. It was given a weighted score of a 4.6, a weighted score of a 4.6. So I was able to do all my work in Excel, transfer it over, and get it overlaid here as needed. So, and like I said, here's all 4 scores for each, there are, I guess, all 6 scores for each matrices, each matrix I ran, and there's the age matrix, and it's just all there when it wants to load in. So that's pretty much it. So are there any questions?
Yeah, Matt. So Erin Myra, she's having a little bit of trouble with her microphone, but she's got 2 questions for you.
Right.
The first question is, have you mapped customer complaints to see if there are any patterns or that would validate your data? And the second question, are you using this information for future capital improvement projects?
Well, the first one, let's see, let's try to pull this up to see it. The second question, that is that's the intent. I'm slowly wanting to use this for our data assessment stuff to improve on this problem. And like I said, once we get the ability and the funds to do so, for instance, we're in the process of getting a crawler camera. So it would, once we get all that up and running, it's going to be nothing for us to drop in, for instance, let's say there's this segment here, all through here is all red. It'd be nothing for us to drop in this manhole here and on a big wet day, rainy day, and just see and look for potential problems of I&I. And if there are, make note to address those and possibly repair those in the future. Hope that answers her question that way. And then the first one with customers, that's kind of with the, that's kind of where we're at with the laterals. Like I said, we're slowly building that database, and once we get that and get enough of that data, then we can go back and use what we find through there and kind of narrow each section down and kind of find out that way. I guess that's kind of going to be a long-term goal, because there's a lot of laterals and information on that end to gather. But Aaron, I hope that answers your question somewhat.
Yeah, actually, that was my fault. That was actually from Eric Muncie. Sorry, Eric.
Sorry.
No, that's my bad.
My speaker's a little fuzzy over here, so I apologize with that. Eric.
No, that's my bad. Does anybody else have any questions for Matt while we got him here? Okay, if not, we'll move on to Kent Parks. I think I saw Kent on the list. Let Kent take it away. He's going to be talking about the Indiana LiDAR project, giving us an update on that. So,
just got to figure out how to get it so I can share my screen here.
let's see. I think, Matt, you have to stop sharing, I believe. Yep, there it goes.
Okay, well, hopefully you can see my screen. I've got a map up there.
Yep, we can see it.
Excellent. So this is the status map of the state of Indiana. We were contracted to do all except for Hamilton, Marion, and Wayne counties. They were under separate contract. So that's why there's holes there. But everything in green at this point has been delivered to Chris Morse at NRCS. And eventually that trickled down to reach all those counties. So each county should have a hard drive with their LiDAR data if you're a green county. The areas down there in the southwest, which is most of these people on the call today, are still to be acquired. We're on year 3 of trying to acquire those, and probably don't have to tell you, it's been a very rainy few years. The most recent, we had the Ohio River, and Patoka didn't look bad, but the White and the Wabash were way out of their banks. And then this last week, we had areas down there that got between 2 and 3 inches of rain, which again pushed everything out of its banks even worse. So we continue to monitor the weather, continue to work with USGS to look for an opportunity to come in and acquire it. They have relaxed a little bit their no standing water that is normally one of the requirements. They're now looking at it, and we've shown them plenty of pictures of water and same area time after time, so they've relaxed some of those. But when we get into massive amounts of flooding, where it continues from the riverbanks way out into the fields, then that's kind of a no-go at this point in time. And unfortunately, we've had way too much of that versus just a little bit in ditches and a little bit of ponding here in the fields around the area. So, and then our next issue we'll have is, as we see warm weather coming and moving into April, is our normal leaf out. And once we get to that, obviously that prohibits us from acquiring the LiDAR data also. So just kind of an update on everything. Again, everything in green at this point in time. We've delivered Chris Morse. Chris hands it off to IJIC, and IJIC delivers to the counties. So your county should have LiDAR data if you're in one of those green counties. Everything else down there is still a work in progress, and waiting on the final acquisition before we can process and deliver those counties. And I'll pause there to see if anybody has questions so far.
Kent, we just got a flood warning for the Ohio today. It should be down late next week, early the week after. Is that going to push us back again for Vandenberg, or do we still have a shot?
Yeah, I actually was about 7 o'clock this morning was talking to one of our pilots, and they were looking at all the NOAA gauges, and for both the Wabash and the Ohio are high and getting higher versus going down over the next few days. But yeah, if that holds true, if their prediction holds true, we would probably be very close to a leaf off or a leaf on condition at that point in time. I'm still holding my breath that maybe their guesstimates are a little off, and we may be able to squeeze some flying time in there. The 10-day weather forecast doesn't look too good anyways, as far as not so much the amount of rain, but the fact that there's precipitation, if I remember right, in that part of the state 7 out of 10 days. And we've had a couple of days where marginal flying actually last Sunday, the 14th, we got just a minor amount of rain. The 15th and 16th, we actually sent 2 planes to the area. And by the time they flew from Dayton, Ohio over to the area, the cloud ceiling had dropped, and we weren't able to get under the cloud ceiling. No rain those days, but it had very low cloud ceiling due to all the moisture in the air. So, but yeah, it's going to be a challenge. Again, if we can get somewhere in the next 4 or 5 days, the river doesn't come up too much, and we have clear weather, we're going to make an attempt at it. But it's not looking good, let's put it that way. Any other questions on so far?
No, I don't think so. I think anybody else going once, going twice?
This is Joanne Keene.
Hey, Joanne.
Hi, hi Kent. I just wanted to make a plug-in for the IJIC Elevation Work Group. If anyone is interested in LiDAR elevation, any of the state LiDAR projects that is going on, we've got plenty of stuff going on. You're more than welcome to join. We meet monthly. The meeting is usually at the end of the month on Tuesdays, and we just met this Tuesday, but the next one, 28th at 11 o'clock. And we're looking for more folks that are interested in this and would like to join us for this work group.
Joanne does an excellent job of leading those meetings also. So,
okay.
So the other thing I wanted to touch on, this being a remote meeting, most of you may be sitting in front of your computer and already got the email. I am also IJIC's conference committee chair, and we've been working the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks to evaluate our upcoming conference in May. We made a decision several weeks ago, but had to get all of our ducks in a row. Just this morning we got that. So the Horizon Center in Muncie has agreed to allow us out of our contract for this year and write a new contract for May of 2021. So there will be no 2020 Indiana GIS conference. The next one we will have will be in May of 2021 in Muncie, Indiana. In the meantime, if you got that email, saw it, IJIC, this is unfortunately, it hurts IJIC financially. The conference is one of the big funders. And for those of you familiar with the conference, part of your conference registration actually goes to your IJIC dues. So they're asking that you think about it and make sure you pay those dues so that hopefully IJIC can survive financially for this kind of a situation we're in. Obviously with the COVID-19 puts us in a little bit of a buying potential financially, but we're hoping to move forward with some other seminars and webinars over the next 6 months or so to also provide some education things from IJIC some of the things that we're going to be presenting at the conference. So again, this year's conference has been canceled. We will have one in May of 2021, and there'll be additional email out through IJIC about upcoming workshops and seminars. So, and with that, Greg, that's all I had, unless somebody's got a question about the conference.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Kent, for the updates. It's a bummer about the conference, but I think everybody understands. Yeah. So, okay. Well, next up is Philip Bernard. He's gonna. Chuck Winkle actually wasn't able to present. He had a couple things, actually several things, come up that kept him from attending today, unfortunately. So Phil took over. He's gonna present some stuff that we actually did with Matt Robinette. With some 360 photos and some other cool stuff. So at this point, I'll leave it to Phil.
Hello, just a second here, share. All right, there we go. Yeah, so like Greg said, working with Matt Robinette, kind of a pilot project for our new data collection techniques, kind of a asset management type thing. We wanted to take a look at one of their water towers. And to start with, we wanted to fly the site with the drone, get updated aerial photography that we could use on a web map that'll be the basis of their asset management. And this is our first attempt at it. And this is going to be kind of what happens when things go bad with your drone flight and how to fix them. So as you can see on the roof of the tower here, we've got some holes in the data. Come out to the edges, we've got some really funky artifacts and distortions in the images, and we'll go over what caused them and how we fixed them. So for this flight, used a Parrot Anify. It's a small quadcopter with a 21 megapixel camera, does 4K video. When I say small, it's got an option where you can launch it from your hand, but it takes really good photos. It's got a remarkable flight time for its size. So we like to use it on smaller sites like these. But when I flew it and processed the data, we ended up with these anomalies. So we come in here on the roof of the water tower. We've got these holes. We've got those distorted edges, spots around the edges. So we had to go back and refly. So come back in, flew it again. Now we've got a nice clean ortho. The first day we flew, it was very overcast. I believe that was on the 5th. So like Kent was saying, it's been very cloudy, very rainy here. But the nice thing about a drone, we don't have to worry too much about cloud sealing. We can fly right under it. But on the second flight, we've got a nice bright sunny day, so we get a prettier picture to look at. So going through trying to figure out what went wrong with our first flight, looking at this and looking at the data, I believe I just flew at too low of an altitude. So this first flight is a combination of a normal ortho flight where the camera is pointed straight down. I flew that at around 300 feet above takeoff, which put us 150, 160 feet over the roof of the water tower. Going back in, flew it just shy of 400 feet, give us an extra 100 feet of room to play with. And what that allows us to do is to get more pictures of the tower for the software to use as reference. So this is from the first flight. Like we're barely 100-something feet above the roof here. And as we go through, there aren't many overlapping pictures where it's getting a good look at the tower as a whole. So as we go here, it's quickly getting out of frame, and these shots aren't being able to be used to create the data. When we go up to 400 feet, we've got a lot more data for the system to work with. So as it's trying to find matches, so when it's creating the data, creating the ortho mosaic and the 3D point cloud that is used to turn regular photos into an ortho rectified image, it's got more images to pick points from to create data. The other problem with this tower is, as you can see in these images, it's a flat white surface. There's really nothing, as it's quote unquote looking at these pictures, there's not many points for it to tie to. So we've got the ladder going to the top. You can kind of see at the very top here, but for the most part, it's a flat white surface, and that's very difficult for the software because it's trying to find the same point in multiple images. And unfortunately, the town of Petersburg takes too good of care of their water tower. There aren't any rust spots or discolored patches on top here that would be visible from picture to picture for the software to tie to. So we ended up with some with the holes in the data. We also used in the second flight, or actually both flights, we used photos taken from an oblique angle. So I set up a mission where the center of the tower is the center of a circle, and the camera pointed at about a 45-degree angle to create, oh, I didn't want to zoom in there, to create oblique shots. And this will help us, we did this to help fill in the point cloud, but it also helps give more data to tie to, but it also creates the distortions we saw at the far edges, because it's the software seeing these pictures taken from these non-nadir angles, from these oblique angles, and it's still trying to rectify the images into an ortho. So you end up with this garage that appears to be sucked into some alien dimension. So when we come back and reprocess, just limit it to the area that was flown with the nadir angle. We end up with nice clean data, and the water tower fills in. One side effect of the holes in the data and the obliques is if you look closely, you can look through the top of the water tower and see the supports. I thought that was kind of a cool effect, but it's not the best when you're trying to get a nice piece of data for display. So as I mentioned, we wanted to use this as the backdrop of a web map as for the basis of some basic asset management. So I was able to take the ortho, turn it into web tiles, and upload it to a program we called GeoSync. This is a cloud-based system, and this is on a password-protected site, but we give that password to any field people, or we can just open it up for general public use. And while we're in here, we can create point layers. And with these point layers, we can attach media. So these points were actually created from geotagged 360 photos, and we're beginning to use those for a kind of an asset management system. So this is the base of the tower. We're able to use this 360 photo to kind of inspect, and we can see the surrounding areas. This particular photo is looking at the control panel of a lift station. So in addition to these points, we can add attribute fields to track information about this specific system, serial numbers. We can also attach other pieces of media. So any file that we want to attach, say an operations manual, we can add here as a PDF or a Word document. So when you have to go out and service this piece of equipment, you click on that and get a full view of the schematics. And then we also took some thermal photos. We're testing we've got a second Anify that has a FLIR thermal camera. So we took a thermal shot of the control panel, opened up. There's no hot spots popping out, so we don't have any shorts or bad wiring in here, so good to know. Also took thermal shots of the water tower itself. This wasn't too useful. We took this kind of in the middle of the day, so you can see a hot spot where the sun's shining down on the tank, but we're trying to see if we can spot things like water leaks or water tower levels with this camera, but that's still a work in progress. So as I said, you can manually create points. So if you're just taking pictures that aren't geotagged, you can drop them in. But all of these photos, the 360s and the thermal images, were geotagged. So we use the desktop version of GeoSync called ZTools. And with this, we're able to create what it calls hotspots. So those are just points where pictures were taken. And for this, I just told it, gave it a folder and told it to pull the geotags from the images, and it created a point layer. I export that point layer and import it into our GeoSync cloud, but it's the exact same data. ZTools is more than just this web map interface. It also interacts with point cloud data. So we use this to augment point clouds collected by our drones. So it goes out to the USGS site and pulls LiDAR tiles down for an area of interest. And we can merge the point clouds we create from our drone with the point clouds Wolpert collects for the state as part of the LiDAR projects. Gives us a picture of the whole area. And speaking of point clouds, so this is the point cloud we collected. I need to go back and include some obliques taken at a lower angle. You can see where the pipe cuts off, where the tower itself was blocking the view of the pipe going up. We also have a couple of issues here at the very top. This is a little misshapen because, again, it's having trouble determining or pulling points for the top of this area. Something we did do to help improve the quality, because even flown at the higher altitude, we still had some holes in the ortho photo on our first run. I went back and increased the density of the point cloud for the processing, so it took longer to find. You can still see there's still kind of gaps, but on the first run, these gaps were more prominent. The trade-off is processing time. So as it goes through and tries to create a more detailed cloud, it's having to do more work. This area went from being processed in under half an hour to taking over 12 hours to do, just moving up that point cloud density. So anytime you increase the amount of points you're creating, you're also increasing the amount of time it takes. So that's your going to be your trade-off. It also creates a more dense point cloud. So we went from 12 million points for this site to over 60 million. So increase the number of points it created by a factor of 5 and a factor of 24 in the processing time. So off of this point cloud, though, we can run measurements, get a rough height for the tower. So it's coming in about 120 feet from the top to the ground. We could also run profiles. So now we've got profile lines. This comes in handy if you're looking at drainage issues. You can see where your high and low points are running across a piece of property and whatnot. No, I'm going kind of fast, but anybody have any questions? Wrong button. Oh. Yeah, that's our show. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
All right. Well, thanks, Phil. Thanks for that. That was really cool. So thanks, everybody. If no one has any other questions or anything like that, yeah, appreciate you attending. Hopefully everybody stays healthy and safe. Hope everybody does. And yeah,
Uh,
let us know if you have any questions. We'll go ahead. What, Phil?
Yeah. So, like Greg said at the beginning, we're recording this. Sometime tomorrow, we should have it out on a YouTube site, and we'll email that link out and pass it around to anybody who might have missed it or might be interested.
Yep. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, we'll see everybody, talk to everybody later.